everyone to our first workshop of our Designathon. And this is a super relevant workshop for all of you because we are going to be getting into all this cool stuff in Figma. And so you might have noticed that I'm here with someone called Alex Martens. And guess what? Alex Martens is a UI and product designer, and she's working at Deloitte Digital, and she has graced us with a little bit of time tonight to go into some of the really cool features of Figma. If you are completely new to all of this, there is a lot in Figma for prototyping and all of the stuff really in what you need to be doing this weekend. So Alex specializes in design systems and really everything related to Figma. So we're in good hands. I will be checking the comment section throughout the event, and I think we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions. So if you have any questions, put them in there and we'll get to them. But I think that it's time, and I'll hand it over to Alex. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. Actually, let me start by presenting my beautiful slides. My name is Alex. I am a UI and product designer working at Deloitte Digital and representing here today TWG and Deloitte Digital teams. I'm very passionate about Figma. So really, if you have any questions throughout the whole event, please feel free to reach out. I'm also one of the mentors. And I'll be happy to help you not just with your design problem statements, but also with your some technical issues if you have any. I'm also very passionate about design systems. So today we're going to be talking about components, which is an essential part of the design systems. So to start off with, so kind of why we're here, I just said we're going to be learning about components today, and the session is called Super Components because we're going to be talking a lot about kind of like different parts of the component. So it's not just creating like a simple button, which I'm sure you're already aware of how to do, but rather how to build a holistic component that can be reused. It is robust, it is responsive, and we're also gonna, like a bonus point, we're gonna be covering some of the new features in Figma, which is the interactive components. So I hope you're super excited about it because I am. Before we start, I would like to get an idea of what my audience level of expertise is with Figma and with components. So if you could so kindly please scan the QR code that you can see in front of you, or I can also paste a link in the comments so you can reach it through that. And fill out this quick survey. It's just 2 questions. And that will give me an idea of what my audience is today, what the level of expertise is. Okay. Sorry, you won't, I don't know, you probably see the results on your screen. I'm not sure, but I can see it on my screen as well. Okay. All right, seems like we have mostly intermediate, a lot of beginners and people who have never used Figma before. Okay. I'll do my best to try and explain it as simple as possible. If you have experience working with Adobe XD or Sketch, then a lot of the knowledge is transferable into Figma. So if you're one of those people who said that you're a beginner or novice, but you have experience with Adobe XD or Sketch, then you should be good, I think. Okay, and just one more. Okay, now I see people still filling out the survey. All right, I'll wait for you. Okay, we have like almost exact amount of novice and intermediate people. All right. Let me see. Okay, I can see people are still filling it out. Do we have many folks here today? Okay, let's just jump straight into the second question. So the first one was on Figma. Now the second one is more on components. So I'm assuming people who said that they're beginners or novice in Figma might also answer the same for components, but you never know. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I think I have a good general idea. So we have a lot of beginners, which is great. It's never too early or too late to start learning some tools, especially design tools. And Figma is very straightforward. So in my personal experience, it was probably one of the easiest tools to learn. Okay. All right, we can probably stop with the survey and move on with the presentation. Okay, so what are we going to cover? We're going to talk about components, as I said many times now. We're going to be talking a little bit about frames and constraints within frames. I know it's a big, painful topic for a lot of people. So I'm hoping to ease some of that pain. We are going to be talking about variance or component sets, which is one of the Figma's features for components. And then we're going to be talking about interactive components. So let's dive in. So in terms of agenda, we're going to start off with some quick overview, kind of like theory stuff. Don't worry, you don't have to take many notes or any notes for that matter. Oh, sorry, I was just reading one of the comments. So quick overview, kind of like a theory. You don't have to take notes because I'll be giving you the link to the file, which you can duplicate and go through yourself in your own time. I mean, you have plenty of it because we're starting so early in the event. Then we're going to go through some actual practice. That's when you actually will need this file if you want to kind of design along. And then we're going to prototype a little bit, some simple stuff, nothing to worry about. And then we're also going to try and have some Q&A. Rachel will help me by reading your comments out because I know you guys can't unmute yourself. And that way I'll be able to answer some of them. So feel free to post any of your questions or comments in the comment section, and I'll be happy to tackle them. So here is the link for the file. If you know how to duplicate a file in Figma, feel free to do that right now. If you don't, no worries. We're going to get to it when we start the build phase. All right, so for a quick overview, let's talk about frames in Figma. And I'll be showing you on the actual practical example when we get to the build. But to start off with, so there are two kinds of frames in Figma. What do we call, let's start, what do we call by frame? It's essentially, and it could be an artboard, it could be a container, like the default name is probably a container. That's the best one to use because anything in Figma that is a component or an artboard, or you can even use frames instead of groups. So all of that we call frames. Now, there are two different kinds of frames that's in the name, static and dynamic. So static frames would be something like your artboard, which is usually like let's say you're designing for an iPhone, and your iPhone screen essentially would be your artboard. And that usually is a static frame. So you can resize it how you want, but it's not going to adjust to the content that you place inside of it. Now, the dynamic frame is the exact opposite of that. So it's a frame that resizes, or rather adjusts itself based on its content, and vice versa. The content can adjust based on the frame. That's achieved by applying the auto layout setting in Figma. I'll be showing you where that lives, but you also have kind of some instructions here on the slide. When it comes to constraints, they are, this is one of the essential kind of pieces of frames. So constraints, again, is a setting, and it helps you to build responsive screens. So let's say you're building something for an iPhone SE, which is like the smallest screen size probably available right now. But then that same element, that same design, you want to be able to resize for an iPhone 13 Max, which is like, I don't know, huge screen size. And you don't want to do it manually every time, like, sit there and kind of push the pixels around. You want to make sure that whatever you build for iPhone SE works as well for iPhone 13 Max, let's say. So that is achieved by applying some constraints. Again, we'll learn more about it as we go through the build phase. So I think we've covered everything for static and dynamic frames. Now, when it comes to components, so components are reusable elements that you can assign. So component is actually a Figma term, I believe. In Sketch, they're called symbols. I'm not sure what they are called in Adobe XD, but essentially it's a reusable element. So it could be a button, it could be an icon, it could be really anything you want it to be that you need to use over and over in your designs. The beauty of the component is that once you set it up as a master or a main component, which is the first kind of part to it, once you set it up as a master, then you can duplicate it over and over again and use it in your designs. You can also override things inside of it. So like, let's say if I create a button, I can always change the label of it in the instance. And whenever I need to make some drastic change, or it doesn't have to be drastic, I can just do it on the master component level. So let's say I created a button, I used it over and over again in all my designs. So, it's maybe I have like 100 instances of it. And then my client comes back to me and says, you know what, like, we don't like the corner radius of 8 pixels. We want it actually to be 6. Not that they probably pay attention to that, but still. And maybe we want to switch the color. So I don't want to spend hours going into every single of those 100 buttons that I already placed in my designs. I just want to be able to do it in one place. So that's where I go to my master component and I make all of the updates there that I need. And that gets carried over to all of the instances. So that's essentially the beauty of it. And when it comes to constraints, which we covered a little bit before, once you set up constraints within one master component, that gets carried over to all of its instances, which is another beauty of it. Let's move on to variance. So we're kind of going gradually in the sort of the hierarchy of how it's built in Figma. So we start off with a simple frame. Then we turn that frame into a component. Now, maybe we have multiple components that share similar properties, but have different values for those properties. And before, I would say maybe like, I don't know when variants were launched, maybe about a year ago. Before, we would have, let's say in this example here, we have two types of buttons, primary and secondary, and then we have three different states for each of them. So before variants, what we would do is we would create each of these components separately, and that would kind of clutter a lot of the design system documentation and kind of like how you pull things in Figma from the assets panel. With variants, we can now combine them into a component set and add the properties and values within that set, which it declutters the assets panel. So before, whenever I would search for a button in the assets panel, I would find, I don't know, maybe like, well, in this case, for example, 6 buttons. Now with variants, I can find just one button. And when I pull it into my designs, I can switch the settings of the variant to what I need. So let's say I need a secondary instead of a primary. I need it in the hover state for my design, and voila, we have it. So that makes a huge difference to how the components were made before. It also implicates more kind of knowledge that you need to I guess, develop for it. You can still go the kind of old school way of not using them. It's totally up to you. It's an optional thing. But in my opinion, I think it definitely improves the use of components, especially for your team members. So if you're someone who is creating these components as like the design system owner, and you want your whole team to be using it, then it is much easier to do it with variants. Now, interactive components. Super new feature that I believe Figma launched maybe like about a month ago, maybe earlier, maybe later. And what it does is, so before, whenever you create a design, and let's say you want to build a very nice and smooth prototype where your checkboxes and radio buttons all can be interacted with and like clicked into, and your buttons have hover states and stuff like that. Before, you would need a lot of duplications of the same artboard over and over again, changing the content slightly, like making one checkbox from empty to checked. And that would really clutter your whole canvas in Figma. That's your basically working space. Now with interactive components, you can set up these micro interactions like hover state, like clicked state, and so on and so forth within your variant, within your variants or your component set. So like I said before, we're kind of progressing into more and more depth of working with components. And so if you are using variants or component sets, then you can also use interactive components, which is a very neat feature, in my opinion, because now you don't have to create multiple connections. You just set it up all in one component. Again, it gets carried over to every instance, which is magic. And you got yourself a pretty robust component set, and also a prototyped animated component. I'm using that word a lot today. All right, so let's jump into the build. So for this, I highly recommend for you guys to jump into the file. So like I said before, sorry, I'm just gonna get to this guy right here. So if you would like to duplicate it into your files, when you first got the link, you only have the viewer access, so you can hover around, you can look into my file. I have no problem with that, absolutely, if you want to stay that way. But if you want to also play around with it, Figma is free. So all you need to do is click on this little chevron at the top, and then click duplicate. And it's going to duplicate. It's going to probably ask you to log into Figma or create an account. You can use your Gmail to have one, and you'll be able to have it to yourself. So use all of this knowledge that you gained today. Also, there are some examples of what we're building. So it's, I don't know, I think it might be pretty useful. So, you know what? I'm going to give you maybe a minute to do that because I don't want to rush you. And then we're going to continue with the build. I see quite a lot of people in the file. That makes me excited. We got 17 people. Amazing. Hello, anonymous. Hi, Heyment. Another anonymous. Awesome. Hey, guys. Bye. Okay. Let's dive in, and we can use the Q&A time to chat more, or I can show you more stuff. So what are we going to be building today? We're going to be building Instagram post. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with how it looks and what it does. And so it's time to build one. Ta-da. It's not just going to be a boring button. So to show you kind of what it's going to look like and how it's going to interact, we're going to build it in the light version, just because it's a little bit more visible on on my slides. So the little prototype, the interactive component piece, we're going to do a tiny little micro interaction for the like button. So it doesn't just switch from like outline to filled. We're also going to do a very micro interaction where it kind of like shrinks and then grows back in. And the same goes for the save icon. I know, magic. All right, so let's jump in. We're going to be building profile header, the icons to make them interactive, and just assemble the whole post and maybe build a variant set with that. So maybe we'll do like a sponsored and then a default post. Why not? So I'll be in Figma, so I'll be moving around a little bit. Apologies if that makes you dizzy. You can also just follow me in the file. That's totally cool. So to start off with, I was trying to be cool like Figma does, you know, with the playground files and give you some instructions on how to actually do it if I wasn't here. But I'm just going to show you what we're doing. So we're going to start off by turning some of these guys into components first. So I'm going to need all of my panels. We're going to select this little more icon, which is not super important for us, but I think is just a good hygiene to have all your icons as components. And this profile data pieces, which we have 4. You might think, why 4? Why not just 1? Well, this is to build a variant set with it. So we're going to start off by creating multiple components. The way we do it is by clicking this drop down right here and clicking on create multiple components. So what changes is that before, so I'm just going to undo it real quick. Before, our layers here in the layer panel look kind of like this. So we've got some groups, we've got a frame here, and now when I turn it into components, you're going to notice how they all turn purple and they have this little 4-diamond icon next to it. That's an indicator of a component, of a master component. If I copy this guy and I paste it, I'm using short keys, so apologies for that. If I copy and paste, which creates an instance, I start to have a little empty diamond for the instance. So that's how you can distinguish what's the master, what's the instance. If I ever use an instance somewhere, so let me just bring it somewhere all the way here. And I want to find my master, all I need to do is either click right and go to main component, or I can also just click this little guy here and it brings me back to my master. Let me just delete this little guy and let's get back to these. All right, so we've got our 4 profile data thingies. Right now, they are all a static frame. Remember how we were talking about the difference between static and dynamic? Well, these right now are just static because we didn't apply auto layout to it. And before we turned them into components, they were in a group. In the sponsored cases here, these 2 lines of text are already turned into auto layout. So that's totally fine. We want them to be in that for now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn these into auto layout because it just makes it kind of easier. And also I want you to show how it works. But before I do that, let's look at how constraints work. And I'm going to use this guy here. So this is an instance. And this is my master. So we're going to be applying constraints on the master so that it gets carried over to the instance. So for the name, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shrink it so you can see what happens. So we've got this weird overlap, which we don't want. And to avoid that, what we're going to do is we're going to take this auto layout frame and we're going to go to the constraints and resizing. And we're going to set it to left. And you can see that this little dash shows you that now it is supposed to be aligned to the left of the whole container for this profile data component. And now, if I wanted to also grow or shrink with how I adjust my my component, I'm also gonna set it to fixed for the width. So the auto layout will now become a fixed container that will not adjust to the length of my text. By the way, so I will be providing bunch of resources for everything that I'm covering today. So you guys can learn more about auto layout, learn more about constraints, and so on and so forth in your own spare time, because we're a little limited today. So this guy, we're going to set it to fixed. So in auto layout, you usually have fixed hug and fill container, which is something that we don't see right now because the container for this whole component is a static frame. So that's why we don't see the fill container. And now we can set it up to left and right. So now, and also I need to set up my text, because text is the most tricky thing when it comes to frames and components. So we needed to fill the container. So now that we are inside of the auto layout frame or auto layout component, now we can select these two layers and set them to fill the container. And what it's going to do, you see how this guy now just started to kind of get stacked. So now if I stretch it, it gets adjusted as I need it. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, so now that that's done, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe you can also duplicate this file again after we're done, so you can see kind of like how it's all built even further. So we're going to create a variant set or component set, sorry. So we're going to select all four and click Combine as Variants. We got this nice dashed outline around it, which indicates to us that that's the variant set or component set. And now what we need to do is just apply some properties and values. So for the properties, we're going to have two. So just kind of judging by the grid that we have here, right? 2 by 2. We're going to have two properties, and I'm just going to type them right here. So one is going to be with subtext, or we could also call it, I guess, sponsored, because that's what it says in the subtext. And we're going to do a default. And this is what I usually do. So I usually do my naming first, kind of like label the grid, which gives me an idea of how, like what kind of properties I want, or what kind of values I might want. And then also for these two, we're going to have the story ring. I'm just going to adjust it to the left. And then for this one, actually, sorry, story ring equals true. For those of you who are computer science or computer engineering folks, you probably understand this Boolean expression. You can also use on or off. It does the same thing. So now what we want to do is we need to select. So let's start with these two. And we're going to create, actually, sorry, let's start as we did with the text. So for the first property, and I'm clicking on the whole dashed container here. For the first property, we're going to call it, well, since we have subtext and default, we can probably go with just a simple switch, which will turn on and off the subtext. Or in this case, just to show different kinds of properties, different kinds of like settings for the variants, I'll show you, we'll use this as, let's call it state. Actually, sorry, no, let's call it type. And these two, so I'm selecting these two because they fall under this column. And so for this type, it's going to be subtext. I guess I need to add that here. Okay. So for these two, our type is subtext. For these two, and the way that I can change the value here is just by selecting however many I need and just typing in here instead of default. Oh wait, sorry, it already selected default, so we don't need to do that. But if you do need to change it, you can just click into this and change the name. Or you can also click on the drop-down menu, and if you already have a value for it, you can select it from the drop-down menu. Now for the next property, again, we're selecting the whole variance set, and we're gonna click on these 3 dots and add new property and call it story ring. And I'm just gonna again select these 2 because they have the ring. We're gonna put the value as true, or you can also use on. And then for these 2, because they don't have it, we're gonna put false. And so what happens, so Figma recognizes this true and false or on and off as a Boolean expression, and it provides a toggle instead of a dropdown. So let me show you what it looks like. So if I just bring this guy over, which is the instance, so I do that by holding Option or Alt key and just pulling it out. Now here on the right hand side in my properties panel, I can see that I have a type to select from as a drop down, so I can change it to default or subtext, and I can also turn on and off my story ring. Pretty cool. So now that we've done that, let's finish this by adding the post header. So again, I'm just going to hold my Option key and I'm going to pull this guy in. And I already set up this post header as an auto layout, which makes it super easy for me to just drop things in. And the way that it's done is so this whole post header is an auto layout frame, and it has a setting for the distribution as space between instead of packed, which creates an automatic space here. So it's not defined by exact pixels. It just places things to fill in the whole space of the container. And I'm just going to turn this into a component by clicking on this 4-diamond icon. All right, so now that that's done, let's move on to the controls. And I'm trying to be cognizant of time. I know we started a little bit later. So we're going to try to go through it a little faster. And like I said, I'll be around the whole event. So if you guys still have any questions, need more demos or anything like that, feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to do it. So let's now practice some interactive components. So I already set up the variant group or component set here. So we've got our empty like icon and a filled one, and same for the safe and filled safe. So what we want to do is we want to build that little micro interaction of the bounce. And the way that we can achieve this is by prototyping these 7 states all in one component set. So for the properties and values, so in cases like this, you don't really need the properties and values necessarily to actually switch between them. Like you probably at most need the state number 1 and state number 4 in this case, which is the activated state. As someone who owns the design system, you can always provide that in the documentation for folks who are using it. But in our case here, we're just going to label them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because that's how they go through one by one. So to do this, I'm going to switch to prototype panel, and I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to start. I'm going to create first connection, which is from this first state to this second one. So all you need to do is just pull a string from here. And now in terms of prototype settings, so it's going to be on click because I need it, I need to tap on it. And then in terms of animation that happens, we're going to do a smart animate. So that's a completely separate topic. I can give you guys links to learn more about prototyping in Figma if you would like. And basically, like, you can learn more about what prototyping can do, because it's pretty powerful, and you can do very many things with it. Like, I've seen people building whole apps in Figma and websites. So I'm just gonna go with the default ease out. I'm gonna set it to 100 milliseconds here, and basically what's gonna happen. So the way that Smart Animate works is it takes my layer that has a name, in this case vector. So that's very essential for Smart Animate. You got to have the same layer name for all of these little guys here, and you can check that in your layers panel. So you can see that all of them are labeled as vector. You can give it a more descriptive name, but I don't think it's necessary. And what it's going to do is it's going to animate between a state number 1, which is like the larger size, to state number 2, which is the smaller size, and it's going to magically actually shrink it. And now for the second one, instead of on click, so we need the interaction happen without us doing anything. So we're going to choose after delay of a 1 millisecond, because we don't want to wait. We're going to just keep the Smart Animate of 100 milliseconds. So it's fairly quick, like 100 milliseconds is super fast, but it's a micro interaction. We don't need it to be super animated in this case. And then one more time after delay of 1. So we're going to go from the large empty to small empty to small filled, and then back to the large filled. So that's going to create that little kind of bounce effect. And then from here, we need this second portion of micro interaction to happen again after I'm clicking on that like button again. Let's say I don't like the post actually. So I'm going to keep it on click, Smart Animate. And then from the second one, again, we're going to go back to the after delay. So basically, it's going to wait for 1 millisecond and continue with the rest of the flow. And last but not the least, the trick to bring it all back to the beginning so that it works again. So we have this kind of looped interaction. We're going to take this last guy, that's why we need it, and we're going to bring it to this first state, and we're going to do this through after delay of 1 millisecond, and we're going to do an instant switch. So we don't need a Smart Animate. So what's going to happen in the end, let's say if I unliked, it's going to go back to that empty state, and to bring me back to where I can click on it again and see the whole thing happen, I just want it to quickly switch from this last state to the first state. So that's what we just did. Through after a delay, it goes instantly to my very first state. And just to be cognizant of time, we're just going to stop at this, at the like button right here. You guys can do the safe one yourself. It's already set for you. So all you need to do is really just pretty much like copy and paste the whole flow in here. And so what I'm gonna quickly do, I have some references here that I built prior to the session. So I'm just gonna grab these guys. So again, I'm holding my Alt key or Option key. I'm just gonna go back to the design panel. And this guy is already set as auto layout. So I'm gonna bring that in, delete this one. I'm also gonna, these two are already from these components, so we're all set. And then I'm gonna also duplicate this one that I built before and drop it in here. Oh no, sorry, this container is actually static. So let me show you real quick on how to do this with a static container. So what we need for the resizing, we need all of these three icons to stay on the left and this right icon to stay on the right consistently. So I'm going to turn this into component. Again, just click on this diamond, or there's also a short key, which I usually use. I'm just going to duplicate it right here and just to show you what's happening. So if I stretch this, you're not going to see a difference, right? Like, I mean, sorry, you see the difference. The save icon doesn't move, and we need it to move because what if my screen size is bigger? And same goes for like, what if it's smaller? It kind of stays there, hovering. It's creepy. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these guys. Okay, they're already set to left-hand side, so we can tell this by the dash, and then to the middle of this whole container, which you can tell by these dashes here that appear in the center of the container with the icons. And now for this little fella, we're going to set it. So by default, Figma sets constraints to top and left, because by default, people usually resize through pulling this bottom corner. So this one we're going to set to right and also center so that it appears in the center. So now we can test it through pulling the instance. Now it all works. And even if I do something like this, it still stays in the middle, which we probably don't want, but it's fun to try. Always stress test your components, because oftentimes when you first start getting into it, constraints still pull tricks on you. And you don't want someone to go into their file, start using your components, and then say, why is this broken? So the final step, these two fellas. So like I said, we're going to have a default one, and we're going to do a sponsored one. So, you know, when you are on Instagram and you see all these ads and people make you buy stuff. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to take these out because I want to show you real quick one last variance set with use of some of these components. But before I do that, I just need to grab our new masters as instances. So I'm just going to, again, pull this and take it all the way out. And same goes for this guy. And both of these posts are already set as auto layouts. So I can just quickly place this in, place this in, and then again, duplicate it, bring it over, and place this one in. The rest can stay as is. And what I'm going to do is duplicate it just to create one that doesn't have. So in this case here, we're going to have the sponsored, but here we don't need it. So this is an instance, right? So we're going to just click into this layer that holds our master component and switch this to default. And I'm just going to delete these. And we're also going to create one that maybe doesn't have the ring, because we can also do that in like the larger component set as well. So like I'm using an instance here, but I want to create another component set that's going to have a quick switch. So this is a separate story of nested components, nested instances, which is something that I wish we could cover today, but we're out of time. So I'm just gonna quickly create a component set, so I don't have to turn them first into components and then into variants. I'm just gonna create a component set right away. And now we're just gonna take these. You can resize this whole dashed frame all you want. So this is also a frame, FYI. And we're just gonna do just using our labels. So we've got posts. Again, let's use type because it's easy. Type default. And another one will be type sponsored. And we're just going to do, again, story ring. And you might be asking me, but I can't hear you, why didn't we just bake this little guy in here? We could have. You totally decide yourself how you want to build your components, but I thought it would be cool to go over some atomic components, which is basically creating a smaller guy. Because in Instagram case, for example, I'm sure you've seen this. It's not, oh, it doesn't always say sponsored in subtext. Sometimes they show places, sometimes they show music and other things. So you can essentially do that on that little profile data level, and then you don't have to have a huge set of different posts. But we'll just do it for the sake of interest. So we're going to take type, create a quick first property, and we're going to take these. It's already set to default, which is the name that Figma uses for the default value. And these ones will be sponsored. And for the ring, for the story ring, I'm just going to copy this, come back to the component set. Sorry, I want to show variant set, but it's technically a component set. But you get what I mean. So we're going to create a property that's called story ring. And we're going to select these two because they have one. We're going to say true. And you see how like the type says mixed? It's because we selected two that have different types. And for this one, we're just going to jump here and say false. And now if I duplicate this one right here as an instance, I can switch this from default to sponsored. Pretty cool. And then I can turn off the story ring and turn it back on. So you got yourself a pretty robust component. And now when it comes to constraints and making it resize properly, so since these are all set as auto layout, I'm just going to quickly click on all of them and then hit enter to go into all of its layers and then put it as fill container, so that essentially all of my, ooh, something got broken. It's because the container itself needs to be fixed to 375. Sorry, I just know this by default because I've been designing for iPhone 11 for the past few months, so I know the width of that screen. Yeah, so basically, now that they're all set, we can test how it works in terms of responsiveness, and it works. So I can stretch and you can see how, I mean, even my text here, it's kind of awkward, but it works a little bit. So that's that kind of concludes our demo. I have some slides, some additional slides here with some resources, and I'll be happy to provide you with more if you need. Just feel free to reach out. And that's it. Now you got yourself a post that you can like or not, and save or not.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alex. That was great. I was just following along and was like, wow, there's so much knowledge, guys. And we don't really have any kind of like, how do you do this questions, but there's lots of comments in the chat of, I'm enjoying this so much, and thank you so much. And I believe someone also just asked about recordings because they found this really helpful, and we will be uploading it to our YouTube channel, and I put the link in the chat. So that will probably happen hopefully it will happen earlier than the end of the weekend, but it will definitely happen by the end of the weekend. So if you're interested and kind of want to rewind to some part that Alex talked about, then you can go do that. And then also, while we're talking about our socials, go follow the McMaster Instagram account because our marketing team would love if you did that. But yeah, thank you. Honestly, just thank you so much, Alex. I'm speaking on behalf of everyone that was really helpful and sets participants up very well for this weekend.
My pleasure. I am hoping that it was useful for many of you. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. If it was, my apologies. But like I said, you know where to find me. I'm on what's it called? Discord platform. Yeah, you can find me there. You know my name now. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn if you want to be friends. I'm very approachable. And yeah, good luck, everyone. I hope you can use some of this new knowledge that you just gained during the session.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Rachel. You're a gem.
No problem. All right. So with that, we're going to close off this event. But if you're looking for more what we have next, I believe that we are going to be streaming a movie very soon. So just stay updated on the Discord because I think that they'll tell you exactly when we start streaming it. But thanks for joining us, and thank you, Alex. And we'll call it a night for this one now.
Good luck, everyone. Can't wait to see what you got.